I've stared down storms that could swallow ships whole. I've buried brothers who never came home. But nothing cut deeper than when my own son told me I no longer belonged in my own house. What happened after would change everything. Stay with me, because this isn't just my story. It's about honor, sacrifice, and the cost of silence. And if those values matter to you, subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. That evening, I had just come back from the harbor, the Florida sun burning my shoulders, salt air still clinging to my clothes. In my hands were grocery bags, milk, bread, canned soup, the little things that keep a house running. I pushed open the door, expecting silence or maybe a hello. Instead, I saw my son, Mark, slouched in the recliner that had once been mine, the only piece of furniture I'd carried from base to base. Anna, my late wife, used to sit next to me there every evening. But now it was Mark's throne. Shoes off, beer sweating in his hand, remote resting on his belly, as if the house belonged to him. "Grab me another beer," he muttered. Didn't even look at me. My hands tightened around the plastic bags until the straps cut deep into my skin. I steadied my voice. "I just walked in. Let me put these away first." That's when he finally looked at me. His eyes were glassy, his smirk deliberate. "You're standing already. Don't make this complicated." Then Emily walked in, towel draped over her shoulder, hair tied back. She saw the tension, and instead of diffusing it, she sighed like I was the problem. "Dad, just get him the beer. It's not worth fighting over." Not worth fighting over. I set the bags down slowly, carefully, the way I used to handle live ammo. I had fought for less, fought for men's dignity, for survival, for brothers who depended on me. And here, in my own home, I was being told that respect wasn't worth the fight. "This is my house," I said, calm but sharp. Mark stood up slowly, theatrically, like he was building to a scene he'd rehearsed. He was 33, broad-shouldered, full of swagger, but untested in any real fight life could throw. He towered over me and said, "No, it's ours. Emily and I live here. We pay the bills now. You're just here. If you want to keep staying, you play by our rules." Play by their rules. An ultimatum. Emily moved beside him, folding her arms, chin high. That hurt worse than his arrogance. I had walked her down the aisle in a white dress, tears in her eyes, after paying for every flower, every meal, every song the band played. Now she was standing against me, like I was a stranger trespassing in my own home. "Either you stop making things difficult," she said, "or maybe it's time you moved out." Moved out. Something cracked in me. Not rage, not fear, clarity. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't plead for respect that should never have been conditional. I nodded once, the way I used to salute, and turned down the hallway. The zipper of my duffel bag rasped through the silence. I packed like a soldier, 3 shirts folded crisp, socks rolled tight, prescription bottles lined in order, my Navy medals in the side pocket, Anna's photo wrapped in a scarf. Precision. No wasted motion. From the living room I heard them whispering. Mark telling Emily that he'd finally shown me who was boss. Emily murmuring in agreement. They expected me to cave, to swallow the insult, to retreat the way I had so many times before. But this time was different. I slung the duffel over my shoulder and walked back into the room. Their faces shifted. Confusion, then unease. "Wait," Emily said. "Dad, don't overreact." I stopped at the door, sunlight cutting my shadow long across the floor. My voice came steady, calm, final. "I've lived through storms that could swallow ships whole. I've buried friends who never came home. I know what sacrifice is. And if you think I'll stand here and be ordered around in my own house, then you never knew me at all. I opened the door, stepped out. The air outside tasted sharp with salt, the sky turning pink with dusk. I loaded the duffel into my old Buick. My hands were firm. My resolve was firmer. I didn't look back at the house. I drove toward the harbor, the engine rattling beneath me, and with every mile, the weight lifted. By the time I reached the cabin, night had fallen. 4 walls, a bed, a chair, a table. Nothing more. But it was mine. I placed Anna's photo on the nightstand and sat down. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not safe, no. Freedom is never safe. But free. Because in that moment, I realized something I should have known long ago. Silence had chained me far more than duty ever did. And by walking away, I had broken those chains. I clenched my fists, hands once calloused by salt water and rope. I wasn't just leaving. I was planning. Because men like Mark don't stop at ultimatums. And I wasn't done being his father. No, the reckoning would come. And when it did, it wouldn't be with fists or shouting. It would be with truth. Cold, sharp, undeniable truth. The kind of truth that could sink even the strongest ship. The morning light in the harbor cabin cut sharp through the blinds, pale and cold, like the kind of light that shows everything you've been trying to avoid. I sat at the wooden table, a chipped mug of bitter coffee steaming in front of me, and spread out my life like battle plans. Bank statements, insurance policies, credit card records, 10 years of numbers bleeding across the pages. 10 years of my retirement drained away into Mark and Emily's hands. I stared at those papers and realized the truth. This wasn't love. This wasn't family. This was servitude. I had been financing their comfort while they fed on my silence. Not anymore. The first call went to the bank. My voice didn't shake. Cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 118 Bayshore Drive. Effective immediately. The operator hesitated. Sir, this account has been active for years. Are you absolutely sure? Absolutely, I said. They no longer qualify for my assistance. Click. Done. Next, I called the insurance company. Remove the Camry and the Ford from my policy. They belong to my son and his wife. They'll need their own coverage starting today. The silence on the other end stretched long. Mr. Turner, you do understand this could leave them uninsured? I pressed my knuckles into the table until the wood creaked. Then they'll finally learn what responsibility feels like. One by one, I cut the cords. Credit cards, closed. Utility bills, canceled. Grocery accounts, erased. Each call was another strike of the blade, severing ties I should have cut years ago. I wasn't angry. I was efficient, like trimming sails before a storm. But this wasn't retreat. This was rearming. That night, I pulled out an old leather journal. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but strong. I opened it and began writing. Every number. Every sacrifice. $40,000 for Mark's college tuition when a state school would have cost a fraction. $20,000 for Emily's wedding, down to the damn swan-shaped ice sculptures she insisted on. 10 years of bills, groceries, home repairs. Every time they had called, every time they had promised, "This will be the last time, Dad." I titled it, The Cost of Silence. At first, it felt like a record, but as I kept writing, it felt like something else, a weapon. The next morning, I walked down to the harbor. The salt air filled my lungs like medicine. I carried an envelope addressed to the Jacksonville Veterans Relief Fund. Inside was a check. Not much, not enough to change the world. But it was money that had once been wasted on keeping Mark afloat. Now it would put food into the hands of men who knew what sacrifice meant. The woman at the front desk blinked when she saw my name. "Mr. Turner, this is generous. Are you sure?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I'm very sure. For once, I want my money to matter." As I walked back to the cabin, something shifted in me. I hadn't just reclaimed my finances, I had reclaimed my purpose. But freedom is never quiet. That night, my phone buzzed on the table. 1 missed call, then 2, then 5. By midnight, a dozen. Mark, Emily, back to back. I let the phone ring, the screen lighting up the dark cabin like a warning flare. I didn't answer. I sat still, listening to the waves outside. I could see it in my mind. The panic on Mark's face when the mortgage came due, the fury in his voice when the insurance canceled, the despair in Emily's eyes when the card stopped working at the grocery store. They were used to a safety net. They thought it was their birthright. Now it was gone. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt. I felt freedom. But freedom carries a dangerous kind of clarity. I knew my son. I knew his arrogance, his entitlement, the way he lived every day with the certainty that someone would bail him out. And now, with the nets gone, with the bills piling, with no lifeline left, I knew exactly what he would do. He would come for me. He would come to blame, to twist, to manipulate. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. I poured another cup of coffee, set the mug down next to the open journal, and turned to a fresh page. I wrote a single line, underlined it twice. "They will regret the day they mistook my silence for weakness." I closed the book and rested my hand on the cover. My whole life had been service. Service to my country, to my family, to everyone but myself. But this war was different. This war would not be fought on seas or in deserts. It would be fought in living rooms, in banks, in courtrooms, in the quiet places where truth hits hardest. I looked out the window, where the harbor lights danced against the dark water, their reflections unsteady, shimmering. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow the real campaign begins. Because Mark and Emily had no idea who they were dealing with anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't helpless. And I sure as hell wasn't theirs to command. I was a man who had spent a lifetime surviving storms. And this time, for the first time, the storm was mine. By the third week in that harbor cabin, I realized something chilling. Silence was no longer my shield. It had become a weapon against me. Rumors swirled through Jacksonville like vultures circling a carcass. At the marina, the diner, even church pews, people whispered that I'd lost my mind, that I had stormed out of my own home in some fit of senility. And who was feeding them these lies? My son. Mark strutted around town, playing the devoted caretaker. "My old man's not well," he told anyone who'd listen. "We're trying to look after him, but he's confused, doesn't understand what he's doing. You know how it is at his age." And people nodded, half believing, half suspicious. But I knew the truth. Lies don't need proof. They just need silence. And silence had been my curse for too long. That was when the cost of silence stopped being just a journal. It became my blade. At first, I hadn't meant to share it. It was for me, a record of every dollar, every sacrifice, every betrayal. But one Sunday after church, Pastor Graham pulled me aside. He'd read a few entries. His face turned red with anger. "David, people don't know. They've only heard Mark's story. If you stay silent, he controls the narrative. You need to share this." That night, I made a choice. I typed out the journal. Every tuition payment, every wedding expense, every bill I covered. I didn't rant. I didn't insult. I just told the truth. Line by line, sacrifice by sacrifice. And then I posted it on Facebook. The response hit like a tidal wave. Comments poured in. Old Navy brothers, neighbors, people from church. We always suspected. You gave them everything. Stand strong, David. By morning, it wasn't whispers anymore. It was outrage. My truth had finally cut through Mark's lies. But then came the blow that nearly knocked the air out of me. I was at the diner, nursing black coffee, when Richard Morrison slid into the booth across from me. An old colleague, honest man. His voice dropped low. David, you need to know something. 3 months ago, your son came into the bank, tried to take out a home equity loan. $50,000. He claimed the property was his. My chest tightened. My property? Richard nodded grimly. He brought forged documents, looked convincing, but when we ran the title, it was still in your name. We shut it down quietly. But David, he knew exactly what he was doing. The noise of the diner faded. Forgery, theft. This wasn't just arrogance. This was crime. My own son had tried to steal the very house I'd given him. I swallowed hard, voice low. Thank you for telling me. That night, I opened my journal and wrote a new entry. Dates, names, Richard as witness, attempted theft, forgery, $50,000. It wasn't just memory anymore. It was evidence. Days later, another truth hit. Detective Morrison, an old family acquaintance, called me after church. His voice was heavy. David, I need to warn you. Mark's name keeps popping up at the casino. Glacier Bay. Poker mostly. He's in deep. 18, maybe 20 grand. Out of credit. Out of favors. That's why he tried the loan. And just like that, the puzzle snapped into focus. The arrogance in his recliner. The ultimatums. The venom in his voice. It wasn't dominance. It was desperation. Mark wasn't lording over me. He was sinking, and he'd tried to drag me down with him. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse. The marble floor echoed under my boots. The eviction notice in my hand felt heavier than any weapon I'd ever carried. 118 Bayshore Drive, I told the clerk. Residents have violated the terms of occupancy. She blinked. What terms? I looked her square in the eye. Respect, contribution, both broken. Her stamp came down with a dull thud. 30 days. After that, the sheriff would handle it. I walked out lighter. Not free, no, not yet. Because I knew Mark. A cornered man lashes out, and Mark was about to be cornered. By midweek, he struck back. Emily sobbed on the phone with relatives, claiming I'd abandoned them. Mark stormed into his dealership, yelling that his father was unstable. He even filed a complaint of elder abuse, painting me as a senile old man. But this time, I wasn't defenseless. I had evidence. I had Richard from the bank. I had the detective. I had the journal. Every line written in my own hand. Piece by piece, my case was airtight. When people asked me what was happening, I didn't spin. I didn't dramatize. I told them plainly, my son demanded I serve him like a servant in my own house. When I refused, he told me to leave. And then he tried to steal from me. Silence followed. Not suspicion, not doubt. Silence. The kind that comes when truth cuts too deep to ignore. That week, I looked in the mirror. My face was older, lines carved deep by salt and sun. But in my eyes, I saw something I hadn't in years. Resolve. Not the weary kind that keeps you alive. The sharp kind that wins wars. Because this was no longer about survival. This was about finishing what my son had started. And I knew exactly how to do it. The cracks began small, almost invisible, and then the whole damn wall came down at once. It started with the eviction notice. 30 days. That was all it took to strip Mark's swagger down to raw panic. By the second week, the dealership where he worked was calling me, not out of courtesy, but because customers had complained. They said he was ranting in the office, shouting that his father was senile, dangerous, a man who couldn't be trusted. But Jacksonville is a small town. Small towns, remember? People had read my journal. They'd seen the facts in black and white. His lies were colliding head-on with the truth, and it was tearing him apart. When his boss finally confronted him, Mark snapped. Papers went flying, curses ripped out of his throat, and by sundown he was unemployed. Just like that, his last steady paycheck evaporated. I didn't celebrate. I knew what desperation does to a drowning man. It makes him claw, scratch, drag anyone under just to breathe. The creditors came next. Vans I didn't recognize pulled up to 118 Bayshore Drive. Men in black jackets banged on the door. Sometimes they shouted. Sometimes they just waited. And Emily? Emily called me that night, her voice cracking, almost hysterical. "They're demanding money, David. They're saying they'll seize our things. I don't understand any of this." I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles ached. "You don't understand because you chose not to. These are Mark's debts, his lies. This isn't mine to fix anymore." Silence. Then the sound of her sobbing. I closed my eyes. I'd warned her. I'd begged her to open her eyes years ago. She hadn't. Now the storm had come to her doorstep. 2 nights later, headlights cut across the harbor cabin. I opened the door, and there she was, Emily. Her sweater was wrinkled, her face pale, and clinging to her hand was Josh, my 5-year-old grandson. His eyes were wide, confused, scared. She didn't even sit down. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I can't keep defending him. He lies to me, to everyone. And now he's dragging our son through it. I should have listened sooner." Her words punched a hole straight through me. I looked at Josh, small hand clutching his mother's. For a moment, I saw Mark at that age. Saw scraped knees, bedtime stories, a boy who used to look at me like I was a hero. And now, that boy had grown into the man trying to destroy me. Emily's voice broke. "What do I do?" I swallowed, steadying myself. "Tell the truth." 2 nights later, she did. The town hall was packed, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with judgment. Everyone had come to hear her. Mark's wife, the woman who had always stood by his side. And now, she stepped up to the microphone, her hands trembling, her voice quivering. "For years," she began, "David Turner gave us everything. He paid our bills, covered our mortgage, bought our groceries, even when he was living on a fixed income. He gave us a home. And what did we give him? We treated him like a burden, like an inconvenience. My husband lied to him, lied to me, lied to all of you, and I stood by him. I let it happen." The room went silent, dead silent. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her voice sharpened. I told myself it wasn't my fault. I told myself Mark just needed more time, more help. But that was a lie, too. The truth is, David Turner deserved respect, and we gave him nothing but demands. My son has watched me choose loyalty to a man who was destroying us, instead of to the man who sacrificed everything for us. And I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. Gasps rippled through the room. Some people turned their heads, others clapped. The sound grew, spreading, until the hall was filled with applause. Not for me, for her, for finally saying the words out loud. I sat near the back, my hands folded, my face still. But inside, something cracked and healed at the same time. It didn't erase the damage, but it was the first honest step anyone had taken in years. Mark wasn't there. He had stormed out earlier that evening, furious, shouting that Emily was betraying him. Witnesses said he drove away fast, face twisted in rage. Nobody saw him again that night. The fallout was immediate. Neighbors who once avoided me now stopped to shake my hand. Strangers nodded at me in the diner. The tide had turned. Mark wasn't the son caring for his confused father. He was the man who had exploited him. And Emily's confession sealed it. But I knew better than to think it was over. Men like Mark don't vanish quietly. They come back swinging. The next morning, Emily showed up at my cabin again. Josh clung to her side, eyes sleepy. She stood straighter this time. "I'm filing for divorce," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Mark's debts aren't mine to carry anymore, and I won't let my son grow up watching me bow to a man who destroys everything he touches." I didn't smile. I just nodded. But inside, I felt something close to pride. Not in Mark. Never in Mark. But in the woman who had finally chosen truth. The collapse was almost complete. The house, the lies, the marriage, all of it caving in under the weight of truth. But as I stood at the window that night, staring out at the black water of the harbor, I knew one thing. Collapse is only half the story. The other half is what you build from the ruins. The 30 days ran out on a cloudless Florida morning. The kind where the sky feels too wide, too merciless. By noon, a sheriff's cruiser sat at the curb of 118 Bayshore Drive. Papers were handed over. The law was final. The house wasn't Mark and Emily's refuge anymore. It was mine to decide what became of it. I made my choice quickly. I didn't reclaim the house for myself. I didn't sell it for profit. Instead, I signed it over to the Florida Veterans Family Initiative, a program for young service members coming back from deployment with no roof over their heads. Within a week, the deed transfer was filed. Just like that, the Turner home stopped being a monument to betrayal. It became something else, sanctuary. The local paper picked up the story. Veteran donates family home to fellow veterans. My face was plastered across Jacksonville. At the diner, people shook my hand. At the marina, they clapped my shoulder. Some called me a hero. But I didn't care about praise. The house had been poisoned. It needed to be cleansed by sacrifice. And who better to receive it than those who understood sacrifice? On moving day, I stood across the street and watched 3 families carry boxes inside. Children's laughter echoed from hallways that once carried only tension. A young Marine, posture still stiff with discipline, gripped my hand. "Sir, you don't know what this means to us." I met his eyes. "I do. That's why I chose you." But redemption wasn't about headlines. It was about blood. About the fractures in my own family. Emily started visiting the cabin more often, sometimes with Josh, sometimes alone. She didn't come with excuses. She came with action. She filed the divorce papers. She found a job. She paid her own bills. She looked me in the eye one evening and said, "I can't undo what I allowed, but I can choose differently now." I respected that. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. But I saw the difference between empty words and real change. And I saw it in Josh, too. The boy ran barefoot on the beach, splashing in tide pools, free from the mold of Bayshore Drive. He begged me for Navy stories. He wanted to know about storms at sea, about courage, about what it meant to endure. One afternoon, when he climbed into my lap and asked, "Grandpa, did you ever fight pirates?" I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in myself for years. And I realized something. The legacy wasn't broken. It had skipped a generation. Mark didn't come back. Not after Emily's confession. Not after the sheriff's notice. Not after the creditors circled. Rumor had it he'd gone north, running from debts. Some whispered he was hiding. For me, his absence was both a wound and a relief. My son was gone, but the storm had finally passed. Then came the text. Late one evening, as the harbor glowed orange with sunset. A blocked number. 4 words. "You'll regret this, old man." I stared at the screen. Once, those words might have shaken me, but not anymore. I forwarded it straight to Detective Morrison and set the phone down. Mark could rage from the shadows. He could snarl, threaten, curse. But he no longer had power. The restraining order was already in place. The truth was already out. The real twist came weeks later inside the church. During testimony time, Emily stood again. This time, her voice didn't tremble. She didn't just repeat her confession. She painted the whole picture. She described the nights I pulled out my checkbook, the times I covered bills, the groceries I bought. She spoke of my silence, how I endured humiliation because I thought love meant protecting them from consequence. And she spoke of the night it snapped, the night my silence turned into strength. Her words didn't just free me from rumor. They reframed me. No longer the broken father cast aside. Now, the man who chose dignity over enabling. The man who chose truth over comfort. I felt something loosen inside me. Forgiveness, maybe. Not for Mark. God knows I wasn't there yet. But for myself. For all the years I carried guilt like a second skin. I finally understood. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about refusing to let the past chain what comes next. From that moment, everything moved forward. The veterans' families filled Bayshore Drive with life again. Flowers in the yard. Wind chimes on the porch. Laughter where there had once been shouting. My cabin became more than a retreat. It became a home. Mornings with coffee on the deck. Afternoons fishing. Evenings reading under a lamp. A quiet life. But it was mine. Emily kept showing up. And little by little, action by action, trust grew again. Not the old trust built on silence, but something new. Something honest. Josh became the bridge. He asked for stories every night. He begged me to teach him knots, to tell him how to read the sky, how to stand tall even when the wind tried to break you. And as I held him close, I knew something for certain. The story wasn't ending with betrayal. It was continuing with legacy. One evening, I sat down with a blank page and wrote a letter. I sealed it in an envelope marked, "For Josh. Open when you're grown." Inside, I told him everything. Not with bitterness. With truth. The sacrifices. The betrayal. The night I walked away. The lesson that mattered most. Love without respect is not love at all. I don't know if I'll ever see Mark again. Some storms you survive. Others, you simply endure. But as I watched Josh run barefoot on the sand, as I listened to Emily's steady voice reading hymns in church, as I shook hands with veterans moving into the house that once drained me dry, I knew my sacrifice wasn't wasted. Redemption hadn't come from the ones who wronged me. It had come from the ones who watched, who learned, who chose differently. The sun dipped low over the harbor, painting the water in gold. My phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Thank you for not giving up on us completely. Coffee tomorrow?" I typed back 2 words. "See you." And as I set the phone down, I realized something. The day I walked out of my own house with nothing but a duffel and my dignity, I thought I was losing everything. But I hadn't lost. I'd gained. I'd gained freedom. I'd gained peace. And I'd left behind not just a house, but a legacy. A story of resilience that my grandson would one day read and understand. Because storms don't just destroy, they carve new coastlines. And this was mine. In the end, my story isn't just about a house, or even about betrayal. It's about what we choose to carry, and what we choose to let go. Respect, sacrifice, honor, justice. These are more than words. They're the foundations of a life worth living. I walked away with nothing but a duffel and my dignity. And somehow, that was enough. Because storms don't just destroy, they shape us. They carve new coastlines, and sometimes they reveal who we were meant to be all along. If my journey left you thinking about your own family, your own choices, then this story has done its job. And if you want more stories like this, raw, true, unforgettable, subscribe to the channel, like, and share this video. And in the comments, tell me, what lesson will you carry from this story?